The secret to controlling everything is realizing you control nothing. This is one of the simplest principles to guide your life by. And of course, it's hidden behind a paradox. Like all the deepest truths, it has to be a paradox. Because I will make the case in this video, of course, that you can control everything. Because this is how it starts, right? The title says, the secret to controlling everything is realizing you control nothing. So how is that? How can that be? How can I control everything if I realize I control nothing? Well, I will start by briefly explaining to you your true nature. What does it mean, your true nature? Well, sometimes English is a good language from that point of view because it gives us a way to analyze words, right? We live our lives surrounded by words, by concepts, by objects. And we create all these illusions in our mind, all these stories, all these imaginations using words. So we have to use words. Ultimately, we use words in the context of this kind of discussions to point beyond themselves to a deeper truth which cannot be necessarily understood logically through the mind using words, but must be experienced. So I will try to do just that. Your true nature is of a human being. And the human being has two parts. Has the human part and the being part. The human is the part which is deeply concerned with the world of forms, with the world itself, right? With what happens around them, right? With objects, with schedules, with plans, with activities, with concepts, right? It's about interacting with the world. It's about making sense of everything that we perceive through our senses. I see a chair, and then I label it as a chair, and I then relate to it from a purely functional point of view. I won't spend a lot of time contemplating about the nature of the chair, right? I don't care. I'm a busy person with a busy life. I don't care about the chair. Or even something more elevated, more real, more natural, like a flower, right? It's just a flower. I mean, why do I care about it that much? Even if it's a nice bouquet, even if it's a nice arrangement, it's just flowers, right? So you see already from this aspect that by labeling everything that surrounds us and by having words to paint a picture of the world and of our daily experience, we somehow create some sort of an emotional disconnect from that with which we are surrounding ourselves by. So if we discount the value of every single thing that we see and experience in our life, this creates already some sort of a gap of discontent, some sort of an emotional detachment, right? I'm not saying that you should be in love with your chairs or a nice arrangement of flowers should bring you always tears in your eyes. But the very fact that we have the tendency, the natural tendency, to put a word on something so that we can refer to it easy without having to think about it and its true nature of that thing, and we just relate to it from a functional point of view, is helping the human, right? Again, we are deconstructing the concept of a human being. So the human is more or less exclusively concerned with interacting with the world in the most effective way. We are busy people, especially today. We don't have time to just, contemplate on the nature of the chair. What is a chair made of? What is the flower made of? What is a tree made of? I mean, whatever, who cares, right? So this is the human. The human is driven by the mind. So the mind is governing our day-to-day experience with the world of forms. Let's look, however, at the being part of a human being. What is a being? Well, and what's the function of a being? Okay, a being is just something that exists, right? A being is a life form. A being is something which belongs to life. It just is. And the very, simple, but yet, how can I say, definitive experiment that you can make to make sure that that you are part of life, an integral part of life, is just ask yourself if you live. Are you alive? Yes, okay. Then if we assume that life is this constant yet always changing stream of happenings, aren't we also just part of it all? Aren't we just a small part yet an integral part of life itself? And I mention integral because life cannot go without you. That's a key important element to understand. If you are part of life as a being, life needs you to do its thing, right? To fulfill on its purpose. And it's your purpose to be an integral part of life. It's very simple, right? The mind gets confused when we go into this direction because you cannot really use concepts that much to understand what I'm saying now. But what I'm saying is nonetheless true. A being doesn't need to do anything to be. That's the point. A human being is doing something. The human does something. The mind does something. The mind thinks. The mind pushes us to act. The mind allows us to understand the results of our actions. The mind helps us to contrast between things, to integrate an experience into our own life lessons and consciousness. But the mind has zero contribution in terms of being relevant for us to be. Not required. You don't need to think your way into existence. You don't need to think in order to exist. You will not die if you don't default into anxiousness and worry and by freaking out all the time that you don't have time or whatever. Life doesn't care about your problems in that way. It doesn't. Which is right. The human condition. It's a tragical comedy, right? It's a tragic comedy. So we have all these problems, but they're self-constructed. They're illusions in a way. In a grand scheme of things, when you look at the planet Earth, I don't know, a couple 100,000 kilometers away from it, it's just like a small blob. Eventually, you don't even see it's blue anymore. Like insignificant in the grand scheme of things, right? I'm not saying that you are insignificant. You are, again, uniquely important because you are, like I am, like everyone else, like everything else. We are an integral part of life, and life cannot go without us, without any of us. The atoms, the building blocks that exist today in the universe, dispersed and connected in this very specific way at this very specific time, is unique, but the atoms themselves are the same, right? The universe is just recycling these atoms endlessly, from what we can tell. So the key point here is to understand that a human being is just a life form. It's a way for life to manifest in a 3D expression, right? In a real physical expression. Because life can be whatever it wants ultimately, right? All these atoms in the universe, they can merge and can, connect and disconnect and form whatever forms they can, based on the law of physics that we know about at this point. And beyond them, most probably, right? Because it's not like we know everything about how the universe works. We are just starting to find out. So as a life form, you are an expression of life, a unique and never to be experienced again by life itself expression of life. And you are not that only as a concept in your mind, right? Don't attach to that being, oh, okay, I'm a unique expression of life. Okay, what do you do with it? Well, it gives you, if anything, the gratitude for realizing that you have this unique contribution in allowing life to experience itself ultimately through you in a very unique way. So, if on the one side you are a human being bound to some technical and physical limitations, right? You have a birth, you have a death, right? You don't have a life, by the way. You are life, right? What you have as a human being, as a human form, as a unique temporary expression of life, you have a birth, right? It's yours. You appear in this world, and you have a death, right? Life doesn't die. You die as a physical entity, but things will go on. And death is not this kind of dramatic, apocalyptic, morbid thing to contemplate on. Oh, I will die. Yes, like everyone else in the past, millions of years that appeared into existence, everything else died. It's not like it's a surprise to anyone, right? So why make it such a big deal? Why not use this knowledge, ultimately, right? We should learn at least that we will die, to make the living as precious as possible. Because instead of worrying about you dying, you just take it as a fact. You don't care, you are not concerned about it or with the implications of that, and you just live in the ongoing honoring of the gift that life made you when you appeared in this world, right? The chances for you, specifically you, or me specifically, to exist in this world are virtually zero. Absolutely virtually zero if you think about it. The exact perfection of historical events and happenings to allow for our parents to meet and have us, specifically us, it's virtually zero. And yet we are here, right? And everyone else is here in the same, from the same kind of initial conditions and from the same kind of absurd probabilistic, chances to be, like everyone. And yet we take it for granted. I'm just alive, my life sucks or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm not diminishing the suffering through which a person must go when they are experiencing an existential crisis. I live that. I know how hard and painful it is. But I also know that you can overcome it. I also know that you can transcend it, rather. Because overcoming seems like you're just putting it under the rug. You're just trying to avoid it and escape from it. No, you're going through it. At some point, you release the reins, right? You release the need for control because you realize you have none. You have no control, no real control in terms of how life unfolds. And you should not be concerned with that, because as you being an integral part of life, why should you be concerned with how life unfolds? You should know, in a way, right? If you are an integral part of life, don't you already know what you need to know in order to be peaceful? I think so. On a deep level, we do know. The being part of a human being does know. that is an integral part of life, that is a unique expression of life, and is not confused about that. The mind is confused. The human in the human being is confused about its nature. The form in the life form is scared about its non-existence. Because from a being point of view, non-existence is a non-problem. Right? Life doesn't understand how a form of life, a form of itself, can be scared. You are me. I gave birth to you. When you die, you come back to me, and then we generate another form. I mean, there's no reason for concern there, right? So why are we then very scared? Well, because we live our lives through our minds. And our minds have a limited ability to conceptualize the essence of life, its true nature, right? The true nature of a human being cannot be exclusively conceptualized and spoken about, right? Like we are doing now. I dare to do it like that simply because I know that, and I heard that first at Eckhart Tolle, the words can point beyond themselves. If you experience something powerful in your life, you know things without having to explain them. You can then explain them, but after you had experienced something, right? You can talk about it in ways that are true to you. However, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. And I know that for most people who are watching this, if you had really the patience to stay 17 minutes with me talking about otherwise what could appear as nonsensical things, if you came to this point, you either had already a similar experience, or you are on the verge of finding out, or being somehow concerned directly with understanding your place in the universe, right? And as you see, these are not religious discussions. I'm not a dogmatic. I'm not religious in that point, from that sense. I was born a Christian, an Orthodox, and I was raised in this way. But in terms of actually practicing religion and going to church every Sunday, I'm not doing it. And I don't feel bad about it anymore. There was a period when because I knew that a good Christian goes to church more frequently than me, I felt a bit bad. But that was just because I was confused, right? Because the mind convinced me that I have to go to church in order to have a connection to God. And I decided for myself, based on my own experience, based on how I live today, that I don't need that. I don't need to force a connection to God. I don't need to go to the church so that God honors me with His presence. I have a connection to God right now, as I speak with you. And it feels amazing. And I know it's there. So, shouldn't I be more true to this connection that I know is there, and I don't question and I never question it, than being scared that God might not love me or whatever if I don't go to church? So I'm pointing here at the need to experiment things for yourself, and not to get bogged in trying to rationalize what I'm saying. And again, I realize that most people try to understand me as well. I'm always in my mind. My job, my professional progress depends on me able to intellectualize things in order to find solutions to problems, in order to have deep discussions which pertain purely to concepts with people who only talk about that, right? At the same time, I'm a human being, right? I don't, or I try not to forget for too long about the being part of my true nature. Because most people today in life, they live their life as humans only, confused, anxious, worried, in their head at all times, not knowing how they can control external circumstances and conditions so that they feel happy and be happy and peaceful and so on. But if you realize your true nature and the being part of it, if you realize that you're just an expression of life with nothing to be scared of, then you become less confused. Then you help your mind to know its place, right? You don't use your mind to interact with the flow of life at all times as an immediate filter. You first allow life to be as it always is, and you just experience it. You allow it to be. You don't resist it. You don't judge it. You don't criticize it. You don't oppose it, right? You don't condemn it. Everything happens as it has to happen. It cannot happen otherwise. And literally, we cannot control from a real life unfolding point of view, we cannot really control anything. We have the illusion of control, right? If I want to go and drink a glass of water, I did it so many times before with a high probability level, like 99.9999%. Whenever I wanted to go and drink a glass of water, I knew right at that point that I can do it, right? So I have this confidence. I can say, I'm in control. I have control over my body to make me go and drink a glass of water. But if you think about it, I don't really have control. I just have trust in the control. But can I actually control my limbs, my feet? Do I have 100% certainty that I'm able to raise up from the couch and go and pour a glass of water and then drink it? There are so many things that I have zero control over, from how my neurons interact to how my muscle fibers must trigger and contract in order for me to raise up. And then all the choreographed activity to go up to the kitchen table and pour a glass of water. There are virtually infinite amount of things that have to work in orchestration for me to be able to do that. But I have at the same time certainty that I can do it, right? I have zero doubt. How can that be? Well, the mind can anticipate. The mind can anticipate this familiar outcome because it observed, right, that I was able to do it for a lot of times and I was successful. But do I really have control over it? No. In its very essence, I have zero control over anything. I don't have control over my heart beating. I don't have control over my brain, making thoughts that allow me then to speak them and then get feedback on top of what I'm speaking and then allowing me to continue the idea. I don't know how this works. I don't control my blood pressure. I don't control my glucose in the bloodstream. I don't control how my liver works, how my heart pumps blood, how my lungs transfer oxygen from the outside through blood to my cells and then take carbon from the cells, mix it back with the oxygen and send it back through the lungs. I have zero control. I barely know how it works, right? I'm curious enough to be amazed and curious about how everything works, but it's a mystery in its essence. I have zero control over anything. But again, the mind, because it likes to label things and attach, concepts and ideas to everything that we are surrounded by, we just take it for granted, right? I'm just breathing, Yeah, I'm just breathing. But if you really think about about breathing and what it takes to breathe, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So my point is that as a human being that you are, you cannot put all the burden of life on the human. It's not fair. Because the human gets overwhelmed. Life is too complex and too messy for the mind to make sense of it at all times. I can promise you something though. If you give yourself the chance to allow things to be as they are and be in so-called flow with life, without giving up, without saying I don't care, but actively participating, actively allowing things to be as they are. Not saying, not detaching emotionally, saying I don't care. No. Care deeply enough to learn everything you can from your experience, first about yourself. Allow life to unfold as it always does, and it always will, with or without your will, right? But use the human aspect, use the mind to try to make sense of it in a constructive framing. Because as long as you will live in this physical form, in this very specific physical form, you will have to leverage your mind to make sense of the world, because you will interact with other people. You will use words to transfer your ideas to others. You will have to influence people. You will have to work with people who have no idea about, the abstract elements of a human mind, right? So you have to use your mind as an interface with the world. But just realize that that's not all about life. That's not all life is about, right? Life is more than just thinking about it. Life is more than just attaching labels to objects that you see and then thinking that you know everything you need to know. You know nothing. You will never know really deeply, truthfully, exhaustively something, no matter if it's this chair or that flower. You will never know what a chair is really made of. You will just see an object in a certain physical representation that your mind labels as a chair, and then you relate to it from a purely functional point of view, but you discount its value completely, right? And the more you experience life from a purely mind perspective, the more everything becomes boring, because you get to see and attach labels to virtually every single object that you are, interacting with in your daily life. And from that point of view, you are indeed, destined to live a boring life. But it doesn't have to be like that. If you always remember that you are also a being, you can start having some good fun, because you realize that everything surrounding you, even if it might look familiar for the mind, it's actually a new thing in every moment. It's a new rendering of life. Life can present itself completely differently in each second, even if the objects are virtually identical from a mind analytical point of view. Everything is unfolding in this present moment, taking a bit of the unknown into it, materializing, the unknown, the unmanifested into the manifested, and it's just churning unknowns, right? Life is just churning unknowns and bringing it to existence for our delight, if you choose to see it that way, for our delight, for the delight of a human being, for the delight of a life form. So life itself can experience its beauty. Is it wrong to look at life like that? Is it wrong to look at the human being as a form with a high level of consciousness that allows life itself to experience its own beauty? I don't know, is it? I choose to believe that this is not only wrong, but very useful, even from a purely practical point of view. Because then your mind will stay concerned with integrating what happens on the outside with what matters to you, right? And then we go into discussions about values, about purpose, about goals, about your mission, in this world as a human being, right? Because I'm not making the case for either the human or for the being. If you stay human only, you will become overwhelmed, and that's a promise. You will become anxious, you will always worry about your own survival, and you will not appreciate the gift of life. If you only stay in the being, you don't need to exist, because life is being, pure being. The highest level of consciousness is life. The highest level of consciousness is not yet materialized. It's not yet physical. It's spiritual, right? It's a potentiality. The highest level of consciousness is a potentiality, is yet to be manifested, is in the field of the unknown, right? But as a human being, you have both. You are already manifested, and yet you are continuing to be part of this manifestation and consciously an integral part of life. Because even when you will not be anymore in this pure physical form, you will still be a part of life, but you will not be conscious of it in this specific way from the point of view of a human being, right? So as a human being, you can just play. You have both elements. You are a human. You realize that you have, you are finite. You are constrained by the nature of your biological limitations, but you are also divine, if you want. You're also spirit. You're also being. You're also part of life. So how can you merge the two to live this kind of flow-based, always in alignment, always actively allowing life to be as it is? Well, this is how the video started. The secret to controlling everything is in realizing you have no real control. So what is that you can really control? Your experience of life. What you make out of it. How life unfolds itself, you cannot control. How you use your mind to make sense of that unfolding in a way that gives you peace, joy, fulfillment, that's on you. That's on the human. And that starts with the mind not being confused about its purpose. If the mind knows that it doesn't have to control the flow of life, it releases its grip on life. It doesn't challenge how life unfolds anymore, because it knows that it's not its job, right? It's not its role. As a being, right, in the human being, the being part is doing the life unfolding, if you want, right? The being part allows lives to just flow. The human, the mind, interprets and integrates that unfolding, right? And I think it's 1 year ago when I came up after years of contemplation with this concept of extreme integration. And this is what extreme integration is all about. Extreme because nothing is for no reason. Every single second, every single moment in this life unfolding that you are witnessing in this physical, form that you have is purposeful, is part of life, is part of the unfolding, every single part of it, right? And why integrate it? Because you can make something nice out of everything. You cannot discount the value and the importance of any second in your life, no matter how boring it looks, no matter how unspecial it is, right? Everything is as special as everything else. Every single moment is unique, never to exist again. Even this one or this one, in which it seems like I'm just, filming a video. From purely practical point of view, yes, but at the same time, I'm not confused about the quality of this moment. I'm not confused about how important this moment is. So I'm not hurrying to finish this movie so I can go do something better. I will do something else, but not necessarily something better. And this philosophy allows me to live life in a way that is not forced, that is not pushy, that is not anxious, simply because I realize the value of each moment and I honor it as being as special as any other single moment from a pure life unfolding point of view. That I, as a human, prefer to spend time with my kids than at work, arguably, that's the human part of it, right? And it's normal. It's normal to have preferences. It's normal to have goals in life. But don't be confused about the importance of every single lesson that gets presented to you as you go towards those goals. Because for me, in a non-religious point of view, to sin is to be confused about the gift that God or life throws at you all the time. And you are just rejecting them because you think you know better what you need and how a gift should look like. I don't want this challenge. I don't want this obstacle. Don't give me this life. I want to be on a beach in Bali or whatever. And then you work your whole life to go on a beach in Bali and you are more miserable than you've ever been, just because you discounted the value of the journey that took you there. And the real value was in actually honoring the journey itself. So that when you end up in Bali on a beach, you can actually enjoy it and not think about all the dead bodies that you buried, okay, virtually, right, throughout your journey and all the struggle that you had to go through to reach that beach. The beach and Bali is not what you really need in life. This is not the ideal destination of any human being, no matter how confused they are. It's not. So, when you just take things as they are, and you have like an active allowance point of view, and you become curious about what you can learn from every single moment, life becomes, first of all, much more simpler. You don't spend energy anymore in fighting it. Can you imagine how, can you realize how and why this is so strenuous, so difficult? This fight against the flow of life is so difficult because you, first of all, cannot oppose it, right? Life flows with or without your mind's consent. At the same time, you do everything you can in your power. You spend all your energy to fight it, to want something different than you already have. And life continues to try to tell you that this is what you actually need. This is the exact lesson that you need in this exact time. So you will suffer until you will realize that you have to accept that lesson first and learn from it. Once you learn from it, then life will present to you a different opportunity, more suited to the improved level of consciousness that you are now operating at. Do you see how simple this is? So just allow things to be as they are. Don't oppose them, because by the time your mind, technically speaking, right, by the time your mind understands what's happening on the outside through your senses, reality already kicked in. Reality is already and always there. Life is always there. I came up with something when I was walking in a park. What happens already happened. From a pure conceptual and analytical point of view, an intellectual point of view, what happens already happened, right? What you perceive to be already was, in a way, right? It's already part of the unfoldment. It's already part of life, because you are analyzing it post-manifestation, right? The mind needs time, physical time, to process information, right? You have, if you take like the visual thing, right? For example, I'm looking at a chair. if this chair would disappear in this very instant, it would take some microseconds for me to understand that, right? So in a way, I would judge the chair even if the chair would not be here in a pure, real point of view. I would have to see the chair. I would have to, my eyes would interpret the light, would turn the light into electrical current, which then would get processed, in the back of the brain, in a region where we process the visual imagery, the visual input. And then my brain has to make sense of the fact that the chair is not there, right? So it would take some time. It takes time, which means that the mind is not really required, right? Surprise, surprise. The mind and your thoughts are not really required for things to be as they are. We think that we have this need to make things in a certain way because we want them. No, you have no control over that. Things are, and then you make sense of them, and then you try to, for some reason, right, which has like evolutionary reasons, for evolutionary purposes, we are trying to, fight reality so that it suits our survival. But what you see is not there in the end. What you see is already part of the past. We don't see in real time as such, right? We see defaced. We are phased out of reality a bit. And another interesting example here is the sun itself, right? The sun, for the light from the sun to hit my eyes, it takes about 8 minutes. Just because of the sheer distance to the sun, I don't know, 100 something million kilometers, right? And if you just look at the speed of light, which is 300,000 kilometers per second, it takes 8 minutes in total for the light from the sun to hit my eyes. The time it takes for the light itself to be converted and me understanding, that is light, it's negligible. But the time the light takes to travel the distance from the sun to my eyes, it's about 8 minutes. So if the sun would not be there in this very moment, I would have no ways to know that in this moment. I would have to wait for 8 minutes. If the sun would blow up in this very moment, it would take 8 minutes for me to still continue to speak here and so on until I will realize that. But I would take for granted that the sun is there, right? It's shining, it looks normal like every other day. So I would have no reason, my mind would have no reason to believe that there is something wrong with the sun, right? But the sun would not be there, right? And the minutes would unfold, and every 3 minutes, 4 minutes, in 5 minutes, I would still talk about how the sun is there, and then, like the sun blew up like 5 minutes ago, right? But I'm still talking about it like there is it's a thing, right? Same with with distant stars, which is even more fascinating, right? Stars with naked eyes that we can see with the naked eye are at, I don't know, thousands, some of them hundreds of thousands of light years away, which is a distance, right? So you travel 100,000 years with the speed of light, right? 300,000 kilometers a second. You keep this speed for, I don't know, 10,000 years to reach the star that you see now in the sky. So this is actually a case that some of the stars that we see in the night sky might not really exist anymore. But the light that we see now was generated by it maybe 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago. And if it blew up meanwhile, we are still looking at the light which was generated 10,000 years ago. If, let's say, we have a star which is at 10,000 light years away, and it takes light 10,000 years to reach our eyes, if the star blew up 5,000 years ago, we would still see the light for another 5,000 years until we will realize that the star is not there anymore, right? Isn't it fascinating? So when you look at the cosmos and at the universe, you realize that the mind is not always the best tool to understand reality. Reality sometimes, and life, must be felt, must be experienced. And then the mind can add concepts on top of that experience, right? The mind can make stories, and stories are good if they serve you. If they don't serve you, just drop them, make better ones. You can do that. So the mind is necessary to interact with the world of forms, with the physical reality, but it should not be the one controlling our life, because it's not in charge of our life. It's in charge of assigning meaning. The being part of us is in charge of life, and that's intangible, right? Now you go into the spiritual realm, the higher self, the spirit, our soul, however you want to call it. I don't want to go into terminology like that. But the being part of the human being is in charge of doing life, right? If we would think about being, from a pure action point of view, like the being aspect of the human being is the doer of life, right? So the mind should not be concerned about that. And when the mind is not concerned about doing the being, and is just doing the physical doing of a human in this world, then the confusion diminishes. It will take less and less time to live with that confusion, which will allow us to free up the burden, to free ourselves up from the burden of resisting the flow of life and just embracing it by default, and use extreme integration as a life philosophy, right? Everything that comes, everything that I experience, everything that I see is part of my life experience, and it's my role and responsibility to integrate it in my life. I might not be able to understand the real meaning of something in real time as it happens, but I know for sure that everything can be assigned a constructive meaning if you so choose to. This is what I did with my own history, right? With my own past, with my own difficult situations in my life, right? So I will give you an example, and it's very powerful for me, right? And just to show the kind of power that we have in terms of assigning meaning to things. My mother passed away on 11th of December 2023. One day from her 58th anniversary. And 5 days from mine, from my 35th anniversary, right? So we caught both our anniversaries in her last week of life. Now, from a purely objective external point of view, that might seem like, so dramatic, and in a way it was, right? As I was living it, I was trying to reason with how things, were unfolding. But knowing now what I know, and being able to stay with that experience in real time, and actively trying to learn from it, even 1.5 years from the moment it happened, allows me to integrate that experience in a way that lifts me up, that enriches me, that allows me to grow in a way that nothing else can, right? And what's the meaning that I attributed to this? For my mother, my birthday was the most important event in the year. So when December came, of course, she forgot always about herself. Her birthday was on 10th, but my birthday was on the 6th, right? And that was the important event for her. And she was like, incredibly happy the whole month of December, because it was my birthday, and she was preparing for my birthday, and then, holidays and Christmas and so on. So I was a bit conflicted and intrigued that somehow her passing happens in such proximity with my birthday. I was like, all her life she created such a joy around my birthday, and she always was so thoughtful about the gifts and how to make me happy and so on. And now she's like in this incredible suffering, and she will pass away inevitably, right? A couple of I knew, on the 6th of December that she doesn't have much more. And I was a bit confused and intrigued, like how could she do this, right? At the same time, I caught myself very fast, and I chose to look at an interpretation that serves me and allows me to be grateful for what she did and for the gift that, at the very superficial level, I was about to miss. The gift that she actually made to me, right, in that last week of her life. And it was the most precious gift in the end, right? The culmination of all her love and all the other gifts that she could have made for me, throughout my life. And that gift is something that I'm unpacking every single day for the rest of my life in the end. She gave me, unconsciously maybe, her life in sacrifice of me getting to live a beautiful life in service of the people I care and I love and who need my guidance, like my children, for example. She sacrificed herself unconsciously for me to evolve and grow into a responsible adult and a human being who can appreciate the gift of life, which I was never able to do before. She was always able to enjoy the simple things and be grateful for everything and not have huge aspirations, but always be happy with what she had. And I was always pushing for more. I was always wanting to overcome my condition, or I was always in my head. I was always in my mind. I was always trying to push my boundaries, but I was also unhappy because I was not honoring the being at all in the human being, right? I was a perfectionist. I was a pragmatic pessimist, as I called myself. I was always trying to push myself. I was never content. I was never happy with my achievements because I knew that I can do better. And of course, society rewards that, right? On the outside, it looks like, a high performance individual. I'm reaching stuff. I'm achieving stuff. I'm reaching my goals. But I was discounting the value of life. I was discounting the journey, right? I was not valuing the day to day, which is what life is, right? This is the essence of every day of life, the everyday life. This is the core of life, right? Your ordinary days in your life. This is life. And throughout this journey of 4.5 years since we diagnosed her stage 4 colon cancer to her passing, it took me 4 years of deep introspection to reach the final stage of her existence in this life form on this earth. It took me 4.5 years to be able to be completely still with her in those days and create on her behalf the kind of pristine, non-judgmental, safe space in which she can just be and not cling anymore to this form, right? To the human aspects of her existence. I built for 4.5 years my connection with the being part of the human being. And I was able to give that back to her as my last gift to her on 10th of December. Right? So my 4.5 years and my whole upbringing up to the last 6th of December that we celebrated together was meant to give me everything that I need as conditions to start evolving from that point on into a different kind of person, to honor life for what it can offer me, to be in service of others, and to appreciate the simple thing, because this is what life is made of, the simple thing. And me, in return, on her birthday, I was able to be there for her, not as a human, but as a being. As a space of consciousness, still, present, non-judgmental, loving, for her to pass and embrace again life in its core through me. That was my gift back to her on 10th of December. And the next day, the mission was complete, right? I received my gift on the 6th. It was the celebration, right? I concluded the University of Life, for 4.5 years. It was the most difficult and challenging degree that I can imagine. And then, like I celebrated on the 6th, she was there with me, for me. I realized the gift that she made to me, she gave me. And then I facilitated her passing together with my father. And I want to believe that my father benefited also from the being part of me, was able to be there, not confused, not anxious, yes, extremely sad, but not panicked, not avoiding. I was looking at her and absorbing every single breath, especially the last ones, which were very difficult. But they were also very beautiful at the same time, very precious for me. And this is my story in a way, right? And all this example just to show you that you can decide to attach a meaning that serves you and your life's purpose. I could have been as entitled or even more entitled to continue to believe that life wronged me, like this should not have happened, like why she should have had cancer, why this happened to us, and so on and so on. And I was like that at the beginning, right? But then I transcended my own condition by realizing that this is what it is, and it's my responsibility to make sense of it in a way that serves me and the other people around me that need my assistance and my guidance, right? I had to leverage the incredible love and support of my wife, first of all, throughout these 4.5 years, because I was not able to do it. But now that I'm still integrating, and by the way, this very clip is part of me integrating this phase of my life, right? This kind of public journaling that I'm doing it also because it serves me, right? It's like a one-to-many therapy, if you want. I'm speaking to you, imagining that you are somewhere there, and you help me process and integrate what happened to me. And at the same time, I always maybe help someone change the way they look at things for their own service and benefit, and for the benefit of others. So it's a win-win strategy for me, what I'm doing now. So decide to look at things in a way that serve you. Allow things to be as they are, and realize that your mind is not meant to contrast always everything and judge the natural unfolding of life. Your mind is just there to help you integrate what happens to you. What to integrate? Everything. Every single thing ideally must be integrated, because there is meaning and lessons. There are meaning and lessons in every single experience of life that you have. That's why I call it extreme integration, because nothing is to be left over. Everything is important. not in the sense of ultimate importance, like this is more important than this. Everything is as important from the being point of view, but the human part has to make sense of it, has to assign meaning, has to see how their life experience has a certain trajectory. What are you aspiring to achieve? How can you live your life day by day in alignment with your values so that you can live a fulfilling life, right? That's the journey. That's the process of transformation of the human, right? Of the mind. The being is always perfect, always unimprovable. It's perfect. Things unfold in a perfect way. The mind is confused. The mind doesn't know what to do sometimes with how things are, right? I didn't know what to do with how things were when I first found out about the diagnosis. It took me 4 years to realize how amazing everything happened and how precious this gift my mother made to me, right? How precious was this sacrifice that she unconsciously made, most probably, right? She didn't want to get sick, of course, but I see it as an unconscious sacrifice to jolt me out of my former, initial condition, to actually allow me to experience a better life in service of more people, to be more loving, more caring, less judgmental, and more appreciative of life itself, right? So life has this way of nudging us along the way so that we don't end up ruining it, ruining the gift by not appreciating its preciousness in the end. I hope this helps. Good luck.